Welcome to the GoldSim's October 2024 webinar. Today we'll be talking about dashboards. So the agenda today is first to just introduce you, but really what I want this to be is more of the nuts and bolts of how you put together a dashboard. And so I'm just going to go through each topic. And these are first, I'll start with static graphics. This is important. And then we'll go into the different types of controls. So when I say controls, those are the things that you add to a dashboard that your end user will be working with, either for display or for interactions. Then I'll be talking about, after we get going through the result displays, the buttons, simulation controls, then I'll talk about attributes, which is a powerful dynamic feature, and then how to work with scenarios, because that's an important part of the dashboard if you plan to use scenarios. It also makes scenarios more powerful. Okay, so I don't really want to spend a lot of time showing you examples, but it is nice to just kind of see some different types. And I'm currently, I think these models were saved in our latest beta version of GoldSim. So I need to use that version. Okay, so I guess I'll just start with the most complicated one first. This one is a model that's used for running in slow motion. So what it does is it shows you kind of more of an interactive type of display. I would say this is less common, but I just wanted to show it as an example. So I'm just speeding up the simulation by using the slider. So you can see it's still going pretty slow here, but anyway, it's just simulating. Let me turn the browser. One second. Need a little bit more space. Okay. So it's just simulating water flowing through a pipe and some pump stations over to another tank, and operating controls and some other things that through the dashboard you can control to run like what if scenarios on the simulation. Okay, so there's this level of detail you can go to. So let me just, and then so I'll just flip through some of these. So this model here, the reason I wanted to show it to you is because it's kind of got a lot of things crammed into it. Let me speed we don't need to do slow motion anymore. It's got a lot of things crammed into it, but I just wanted to make mention of how long the simulation takes to run it while you're looking at the dashboard, and just mention that when you leave the dashboard and you run a model, that there would be probably a savings in time and simulation time if you have a model that takes a long time to run and you don't want it to go slow, you want it to go fast. So in that case, you would, if you have a lot of result displays that have to update a lot of times during a simulation like this one does, it can slow the simulation down if you're watching it. But anyway, this is a, pretty basic. You can see, I mean, there's a drawing here, but it's a very simple drawing that can, I think I drew this in PowerPoint, but you could draw this in GoldSim with GoldSim objects. Maybe I did draw it in GoldSim. It looks like I may have, but anyway, we've got text, we've got little, simple rectangles and stuff like that. This would be, your most straightforward way to go with the dashboard. I would say, like, maybe try not to get too much more complicated than that. In fact, I was thinking back on all the dashboards I've built for actual projects, and I would say most of the time I would probably, if I were to do anything different, I would say that I would try to aim for simplicity and say no sometimes to people that were always like, oh, wow, you can show this. Well, can you show this other thing? And can you make it so that under these certain conditions, this one thing disappears and another thing appears? And yeah, okay, we can do that and spend ages doing it. But these things come at a cost, maintaining all of this stuff. So navigation tabs, I just wanted to make mention of this. This is very basic, but you can kind of trick the audience, so to speak, by making it appear that there are these tabs that when you click on them and they take you to different pages of your dashboard, but that's not true. This is 4 dashboards. So if you go here to click on the browser and open that up, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 dashboards, and all I'm doing is clicking a button that takes me to those. But you can make it look that way pretty easily, just as long as the graphics all line up here. Okay, here is an oil, it's like a process simulation for extracting oil. But it could be any process, right? Where you have a flow cycle and recycle loops. And in this case, they had a couple of loops here to get to a certain criteria of water quality. And so it was kind of a complex flow system, and so it kind of helped to show this in a very schematic way with numbers. But one thing I just wanted to mention is that it could have been, if it depends on who the audience is, you know. But over time, I've learned that while it's nice that you can create a dashboard that shows the flow diagram, just be aware that it could be that you can create a model that inside the model itself describes even better the flow diagram. Now, there's pluses and minuses, obviously. There are certain things that you want to just see on the screen, you know, so then you'd want an output displayed. But when you run this model, you could hover over these elements and see their results as well. So I think what I've learned over the years is that I feel that more effort should be put into organizing the model in a way that makes it easy to understand how the flows move, more than the dashboard, and put less into the dashboard in cases like this. Even though it is really nice to see, it is really nice to be able to, you know, just see the system with these numbers in a very basic level. But this takes, you know, just doing this simple thing right here takes a lot of time, just to get everything all straightened out and looking good and everything. Also, internally, we've used GoldSim to help with our internal software development. This is a prototype of a new element that we're going to be releasing in GoldSim 15, and it's a flow controller, and it is fully functional. Well, not quite. You can't really input text into a GoldSim dashboard. So some of this is just a static text. But if I change any of these inputs here, then there's logic underneath that is changing. So if I change this to a certain type of controller, then you can see that the dashboard updates dynamically, right? It's hiding and displaying certain things on here depending on which of these I pick. So we were able to prototype, you know, how the layout of this thing would work. So I'm just showing this as not necessarily something that you would do necessarily, but that the flexibility of a dashboard allows you to pretty quickly mock up certain things, certain types of input interfaces like this. Okay, so those are some examples. And now I'm going to talk about actually building a dashboard for a real model. This is a very basic model. I was trying not to get it to be too complicated, but I need enough inputs to make it relevant. And it could be that maybe this is as far as we get. But anyway, so here's a pond model. We have some inflow and some evaporation rate, and I need to just say mean inflow here because I'm using a stochastic. And link that to my data element here. Okay, so let's say we want So we have this inflow going into this pool. We have some evaporation going on. We have a lookup table that helps us define the water surface area to calculate evaporation. Then I was going to add a demand, but anyway, something simple like this. So, and I also wanted to show we have another input here. Oh no, not that one. This one, evaporation rate. I have an input here that is a vector. So I just wanted to show how can we deal with that in a dashboard. Some simple input controls is what I was thinking here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll go here to the container section, go to dashboard, and usually it's better if these are put somewhere out of the way a little bit. And I also, when I'm naming these, you might have multiple dashboards for a model. If I do, then I might call this one something dashboard. Is usually what I do. I just put something in the front. Main. And I don't even think, does it allow spaces? I can't remember. Let's see if it does. It does, yeah. So this type of name, you can put spaces, which is nice. Just like result elements, you can do the same thing, put spaces in. The title there, it impacts somewhere. I can't remember exactly where, but I never changed that. Okay, the next one down here, dashboard size. I would say initially start small. I know it might be like, whoa, we can have, look how big, this is as big as my screen. My screen is huge. No, we don't need to do that because you want to aim for the lowest common denominator of your audience. And so and always just try to keep things simple and expand if you have to. But that's why, I don't know, I would say this one's a pretty good size. Or, you might want to turn it from landscape to portrait versus landscape, not sure. But anyway, you can see here that the width is a little bit greater than the height. And and the default background is this kind of grayish. Typically I'll start with white and then I might put a color in later on. But let's say that you already know kind of the color scheme that you're going for. Definitely the easiest way to deal with that is to use one of our colors that are already in here. But you can add your own colors. You could say, no, I already know what, I already have a color palette. Right now I don't have one set up. It's just all grays, but we can go up here to model, options, graphic, and right here. So you just click on, in our library, just click on the first color block and you say, I have, I guess this color in my library. So then we go back to our dashboard, or we can either change the properties here, or you can change them by double clicking on this icon. We can go here and there it is in our library. Okay, so there is our new dashboard. So we're in the dashboard, but as a GoldSim user, as a licensed GoldSim user using GoldSim, the main GoldSim, you're still going to have all the same, controls and toolbars. When you create a player of your model and you send them, and you create a dashboard and you send this to your end user using the player, they will have a much more limited screen area out here outside of the dashboard main window. They won't have these toolbars and so forth. They will have this run. They'll have a few things up here to do. But anyway, it'll be much more limited. So when you're creating a dashboard, the intent is usually for your player end user. It doesn't have to be, obviously, but that would be the largest use case, would be the player user. So what it means is you need to pretty much think about what's every point of input that they would be interested in, and we need to provide that to them on this interface, either multiple dashboards or one. However, if that starts to get out of hand, then you might want to look at other options like external files. You could have them update a spreadsheet file and then that just load that. That would be a lot. That would save a lot of time, right? Instead of having to put a whole bunch of controls on. So just some things to kind of weigh and consider. Now, just because of my screen being kind of, let's see, a little bit harder for me to get over here to this one side, I'm just going to move my toolbar. This is my dashboard control toolbar. I'm just moving it out of the right side where it is by default. And so now I can start working with things. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was input controls. Let's just go through them. I've never usually when I do a webinar, I kind of gloss over these. I'm just going to walk through each one. So here's an input control, it's called officially called an input edit box. And so what you have here at the top is this link, hyperlink. And what you do here is you connect to the data. Now, this is an input field for one value. So that means we can only connect to things that are scalars. And also it must be a data element. That's it. That's all you get. So I can come in here and say, I want to have the ability to change this mean inflow. And the default, I want it to be 100. And I don't want it to be able to allow negatives, and everything else I don't really care. So I'll just leave it like that. But notice there are a bunch of other properties here we can change. Okay, but once you put it in here, that looks great and everything. But you see when I put my cursor over it, I can't actually change the number. So that means that this dashboard is currently what's called not active. I guess you could say it's inactive. And if you click on this little icon right here, this first one, then what you do is you toggle it from being kind of like editable to actionable or workable, or like actually what the end user will see. So it's just a way to kind of switch back and forth. And you can do that quickly by holding down Control and type D, Control D. So Control D will toggle that. So that's one input. And if I want to add another control to this dashboard, I have to go back into inactive. So Control D to get out of that. Okay. Another type of input is the input grid. This one's really nice for when you have an array. In our case, we do have one. We have a vector. So there it is. And we can also put ranges on each of them. We could say for all of them, I want the minimum to be 0. That would prevent anybody from putting negative numbers in, which could be useful. And then there's some other properties we could change, but it's pretty much good enough for now. So there's our input table. And usually what I'll do is using also my GoToWebinar little thing is over here, so it's hard for me to work with these toolbars. Okay, so okay. All right, so usually what I'll do is I'll just put a regular text object, just a static text. Actually plain text, I should say. You can't format this text. Well, you can format it, but you can't do rich formatting. So we could do something like that. And I always like to put the line around this. So I change the line to transparent. The nice thing about using one of these built-in color codes is that, well, it's already a graphic designer helped us, develop these different color schemes. So if we had, this color scheme, then we could just make one, to make a border, we would just make it one different shade of that, which makes it kind of nice. But anyway, so then you can just make this as large as you need it, and then right click on it, make sure that its order is in the back. That's really important. It might surprise you sometimes that you won't be able to click on a grid, on a control, because you have a graphic sitting in front of it and you didn't realize it. Okay, so we have some others. Slider, list box. So the slider is really nice because it's an easy way to constrain your end user visually with where the number can be. So if we select demand, then we could say the mean is 100. Max 200. This is a lot of points. So this is, we're going to have a slider that can pick values at a decimal level between 0 and 200. That's a lot. So the one thing about a slider that you'll want to do is probably, if you have a large range like that, you'd want to change it to something, a larger number like that, something like that, that would make it easier, so that when I Control D and make this active and try to play with it, then it's not really hard to get onto a, fairly rounded value. So if you have to get really precise with the value, then you don't want a slider. Okay, the list box allows you to, let's say we have an input in here that's called, um, um, let's say pipe diameter, and you have to pick a value, and let's say minimum is 6. And so then in here, you could say, I want a value to be picked that the end user can pick, but it's going to be something. Okay, and then you can pick which one is the default. All right, so when we go to activate the dashboard, now you can see the user can pick them like that. So the plus on that is that you can see all the options all the time. So if you don't want to see all the options or you don't need to, usually the combo box is an easier way to go. This way, it will collapse when you're done using it. I don't think I need to really demonstrate it. It's a very similar process, but the list collapses after you make the selection. So it's more like a button, right? List box, pretty basic. Then there's the checkbox for true and false. And then there's a date time picker. The thing about the checkbox here is you can see that by default, it has a transparent background. So some of these controls have transparent backgrounds. The checkbox does not. Also, because the checkbox involves text within the control, just be careful with how much space you provide between the end of the text and the end of the control, because that width of the text will change depending on what screen you're showing it on. With a slider, you can just set the background to be similar to the background of the dashboard, and then it will give it a look that might be a little better. You could also take off that frame, the border, and then it would look like it's like that. So there are some things that you can do to kind of make it look like it's a transparent, but some of the tools or controls are just not transparent controls. And that's it. Okay, so that's the input. So let's go with now looking at on the output side the controls that we have. So the simplest one is just this result display. So we can show here, if you look, when you click on this, notice the first thing here, it says, do you want to just monitor its output, or do you also want to look at a Monte Carlo result? So that could be actually really useful. Let's say, for example, we want to, well, let me first do a simulation, and let's just look at the final value of this pool, see if it looks interesting. And it doesn't, because I ran only a single realization. So let me run this for more. This is just telling me that now results are not saved everywhere. They're only saved in multiple realizations, are only saved in results. So that reminds me that I need to get a couple of results put in here. And I want to also display these on the dashboard. So I'll have one that shows the pool history, and this other one's going to show the final value of the pool as a distribution. Okay, so now I run the model, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so there's our distribution there, and in its different forms. Okay, and then the time history looks like that. Okay, so let's say I want to show on my dashboard, let's say I want to show the mean of this probability distribution. So the mean is shown right here. We could say, oh, let's just tell them to open this up and they can just look. 28. Well, you don't have to do that. We could have that displayed. So let's go over to the dashboard and have that displayed. So I'll do that here with my result display. So I'll double click on that. And then I'm not showing just an output. I'm showing a Monte Carlo result. I want to access the Monte Carlo result because I want to get to the mean. So by doing that, it now will show me a list of all of my distribution result elements in the model. That's it. That's all I can connect to. Okay, so once I've connected, yep, the mean, that's what I want. And I will maybe I'll need that many significant figures. So then I'll say okay, and now run the model, and there's the mean, the same mean value. Okay, so there's other nice things we can show, like if we wanted to display risk, for example, and we had risk in terms of exceeding some level in the pool, we could come in here and we could say, let's also connect to that same result. But in this case, now I want to say, um, what is the percent chance of getting something that is greater than, and I don't remember what the numbers were, but let's just say 5,000. Okay, I picked a bad number, but let's see. Yeah, okay, let's say 4,000. Um, oh yeah, I think I have to redo it. There we go. I'm running the model, and it's 0.06. So in a percent, then we could display that as percent. And that's right here. There we go. Maybe it's a little bit too precise of a number, but we can fix that. But anyway, that's the result there. We could also come over here and say, oh, actually, I want to result a status display instead. So we could say maybe based on the average, or maybe, yeah, I guess we could say, no, let's say, let's just say monitor. Well, I guess, okay, the thing about the result display, what matters is, do you only care about the final value, or do you want to see the status during a simulation? So, I showed you that one example earlier that was showing you the flows and pressures of, in a really complicated way during a simulation while the simulation slowed down. In that case, you would probably want something that would be switching back and forth between states, but that's an uncommon scenario, I would say, for GoldSim models. Usually we're looking at the final value, and we're only considering that. So I'll just look at the distribution of the final value, and I'll say, um, if it's greater than some value, then that light will be different than if it's not. So then we would expect the light bulb to be orange when we run this model, for example. So, whoops. So there we go. So anyway, it's usually nice, you could have it be a check mark or an X, depending on whether something fails or passes or something like that. So it does have a lot of use there. That's the result status display. There's also thermometers. So with a thermometer, we could connect this to something like the pool volume and see how that changes over time, and put this up to something higher. And then when you run this model, then you would see this moving. And it all went so fast, we didn't see it move very much. But as you can see, I went above the higher limit that I put on the thermometer. So that's something you need to realize. When you put in a thermometer, you need to know what the range could be when you run it, or under all scenarios that the end user would be interested in looking at. Make sure that your thermometer can handle that. But you can also put a header and a footer down here. You can also change the thermometer to be horizontal. And maybe I'll change this. So now we have a thermometer like this. So it could be more of like a status type of thing. You can also display a text. So we could say, if the mean or we could say, oh no, not that one. We could say if the mean is greater than, or actually I guess we could start with less than. If it's less than 2,500, then we could say fail or pass, something like that. So then what we get when we run the model is that you get a text display, and that could be any text you want. If you wanted it to be if you want the text to appear as something that is, let's say, associated with another output like this one over here next to it, what we could do is we could change the background to the same as the dashboard background and then turn off the border. And that way, when you run the model, you can get a text display that's adjacent to a control that just looks like a text. So this is a common thing I do for if I want the label and the box to disappear when I use an attribute. Okay, and finally, let's talk about the result, the embedded result. So this is something that people have wanted for a long time, and this feature hasn't been around forever. When I started using GoldSim and consulting, I didn't have this feature, and it would have been nice to have it sometime. So it's nice that you can now embed any of your results in any form. So that means you can embed bar charts, pie chart, line chart, distribution, all of those in here. So let's just start for now with the distribution chart, just because I'm limited on space here, but we can show the others too. So when you connect it to a result, then depending on the type of result, you'll have different, and also depending on the type of run that you do, you'll have some different kinds of options you want to consider. In this case, we have a Monte Carlo simulation, and we did want to show the probability distribution. So I want to keep that in chart, but you can show it as a table. The default is the probability density function, but we can change that to cumulative if we want to. And I'm not running any scenarios at the moment. So you can enable it to be popped out. That's the default. Usually a good idea because it's typically best to insert your result charts in a way that they're like a thumbnail. So they could give you kind of a general sense of things, but they're not going to describe everything about the result, because it would be difficult to. You don't have the space to do that kind of thing, right? So we have to think of these in terms of thumbnail images, essentially. There are some exceptions if it's a simple bar chart, but for the most part, you're going to want the user to pop that out by just double clicking on it. And this allows them to do that. And it just expands the chart and it shows more information. And then they can interact with it as well. Like they can zoom in, they can copy data, all kinds of things. Okay. Use the default user interface font. So I would say most of the time, just keep this because of simplicity, actually. I mean, if you need to copy and paste, you're never going to have to mess with the font. It'll just use a global default for everything. And it may not be exactly the font that you wanted. But so yeah, you can make your own font. You can make all your charts have a specific font and size and everything. But that's just more overhead that you've added that now you need to keep track of and make sure. So just keep that in mind. It just adds more time. Use the color at the top left. So that's the color for the background behind the chart. And so typically you want that to match the background of the dashboard typically. So just make sure that the top left corner is touching a pixel that is the same as the background that you want it to be. And then you have options here to hide or show certain things. So like a legend takes up a lot of space. So by default, you probably want to have that hidden. But then you can let the user double click on it to see what the legend is. And then the axes have these different options too. So you can either show just the values. That's it's pretty nice to see values, but if you have to get it a lot more compact, then showing nothing would be better. So let's just see what it looks like. So we run the model, and now you can see here the downside to just showing numbers is the user kind of needs some context. It's kind of hard to see that, but we do already know that the probability is shown here on the y-axis. That's just the default. Well, I don't think we can show it the other direction in GoldSim, so you're limited to showing the probabilities on that side. The values are shown on the x-axis here. So we can double click on it, and now you can see everything. Okay, but if that's not enough, then we would want to change the properties. So now we have to go back to edit mode, get the dashboard into where it can be editable, and just double click on that, and then we could just change this to, let's also show the title for both of those. And there we go. So that now has a little bit more context. So, but just keep in mind that, like I was saying, that does take up quite a bit of the real estate of what you're working with. Okay, so now let's say, well, I want to give my end user control over how to run these simulations. So we probably want to add a button that lets the user run the model. So one thing that's nice about the latest version of GoldSim is we now have a reset button as well. So for starters, I'll do the run and then I'll do a reset. And I'll show you why. Maybe I'll just say run. And then on a button, you have the ability to choose the command that you want it to do. In this case, it's just run model. So now when I activate the dashboard, you can see I can click this and indeed run the model. The next thing I want to do is add another button. So I can click here and add another button, or I could, well, I already clicked on it, or I could just copy and paste the run button. Okay, so then I'll say reset. And that's the next command down to reset. And now in this case, I want the button to look a little bit different so that it's obvious that the model has already run. And a good way might be, well, within GoldSim, we use a green color for that. So I'm going to change this from the Windows operating system default color to my own colors. And then I will, when the button is just showing there without me hovering over it, then I will, well, actually before I push the button, I want it to be green. And I'll just make it this light green. And then when you push on it, it turns to a darker green, we'll say. Okay, so when we go to this mode, you can see that we have these two. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll just put them on top of each other. Oh, but before I do that, I need some way to determine which one to show versus not to show. So one good way to do that is to say, well, you kind of have to trick the model, but what I would say to do is put in an expression that says show run button. And I would put this as a condition and say e time is greater than 0 days. And in our case, we're running multiple realizations, so we'll just say, and realization is equal to, let's say less than or equal to 1, like that. Does that? It's right now it's showing false, so I hope that we'll see if it works. I put the wrong one in here. Actually, it should be show reset button, because we would show the reset button after we run it, which means e time is greater than that. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay, so it should be e time is a day or less, and a realization is less than 1. So that would be when we show the run button. Okay, apologies, but I think it's good to get that straight. All right, so now let's show you, because this gets into attributes. Let's talk about how we can make one of these buttons disappear depending on certain situations, and that's what I want to do. I want the reset button to disappear until I've run the model. Okay, so I'm clicking on the run button first, and then there's this tab that says attributes. So click that, and then I want to hide. I want to hide this controller when this is not true. So I'll change this to not true. And then let's try running that and see if it works. Okay, so it disappeared. That's good. Now I can hit the reset button and it resets. So now I can go to the reset button and also make it disappear. This is just a thing saying that you can connect to a scaler. Okay, so we have this thing, show run button. If that is true, then we're going to hide this. And now when we run it, and then when we reset it, oh wait. Oh yeah, there. I didn't have the dashboard activated. But then you can see it disappeared. Okay, so now I can move them on top of each other like that. And so now you can see that if you gave this as a player model to your end user, they would only see this run button that you could click on. And then when they're done running it, they could click this. I mean, it's just as easy to go up here and click on the toolbar, but I've known there are some people that like that. But I also got to show you attributes. So that's how you can make things more dynamic on your dashboard. All right, let's dive into scenarios real quick. So there's and before we get into scenarios, you can also control the simulation time. So we could put a thing right here that says this is the duration of your simulation. And if you had a calendar-based model, so if we change this to calendar, then the control becomes start and end time. Okay, so here's the active scenario selector. By default, it looks like this. And we have no scenarios right now. But if we had some scenarios, we could add them by clicking on this and then removing scenarios with this. And this is also something you could allow your end user to do. But first, we need to have some scenario data. So that means we should look at our model and figure out what we want as our scenario data. And let's say for now, it's the mean inflow and it's this demand, which I haven't really hooked up yet. But anyway, it's those two things. So that means they need to be accessible here. And let me see what these are. This one's connected to the demand. Okay. And this one is connected to the mean inflow. Okay. So we have these two input controls. If you want your data to be scenario data and you have a dashboard and you want to create a player, you need to have your scenario data connected to a dashboard control. So that has to be in place first. Now that we have that in place, let's go to our scenario manager. And that can be done by going here to the run menu and then clicking scenario manager or F7, or you can click on this icon. And so just for a test, let's add a scenario. And now we can add our scenario data. So I click on this button right here and then add element. Mean inflow, demand. Okay, so now that we have that set up, now what we can do is we can look at the model and see how that works. So when the end user gets this model, they will not, in a player, they will not have access to the live model. The purpose of the live model is like a sandbox. It's a way for you to change things like this, and then maybe we change this like this, and then run the model. what we can do is if we say, okay, let's reset the model, you can say, I really liked this run that we did. So I'm going to save the current results as a new scenario. So when we do that, it says, okay, what's the name of it? We'll say scenario 2. So now the end user can look at this and say, oh, okay, I have scenario 2 here. Now I can compare it to scenario 1. So how do we do scenario comparisons? We need some sort of chart. So let's add a button here. Go back into edit mode. Let's add a new button. We'll put it right here and we'll call it result. And then I will open, or it's actually called show result. And that will go to our time history like that. And so now when we run the model, we can, instead of just running the model, we can run all. So now I'm running 2 scenarios. And so now I have these options. Now that I have 2 scenarios, I can look at things like, oh, what's the difference between these two, one by one, in a probability chart? Or I can say, let's look at the statistic and compare the 2 scenarios, scenario 1 and scenario 2. We can also have this embedded on our dashboard to show only this comparison if we want to. So just depends on how you want to look at it. But the nice thing about showing the full result element like this, instead of having it embedded in the dashboard, is that you have full control immediately when you open it of what you want to look at. So those are the trade-offs between those two. Okay. I didn't go through all of the commands for the button, but it's good to know that there are quite a few of those. So let's open that back up and look at this. As you can see, quite a few things. Some of the others just to be aware of that are nice to have. If you could use open element if you wanted to get someone just to look at a specific element. Not used so much, but if you need to navigate into the model, this is a good way to do it. Go to element. You could also say show container. That'll go into the graphics pane of that container that you pick. This is for external applications. If you want to execute an external application, sometimes that could be useful, particularly if there's some sort of connection with results of that external application that need to be brought into GoldSim. You can open files, so it's good for documenting and referencing things. A message box is useful. So this is just a little thing that you could say, help with data, enter data by copy paste. So you could have this, instead of calling this a result, you could put in a little question mark here, and then we could make this button really small. We could put this next to a table so that then when they click on it, it shows information about that. So another one that is useful, well, if you're connected to a database, you would definitely want a button that allows you to get another download from the database and refresh your inputs. The time series and the lookup table, these are nice. In our case, we do have a lookup table in our model, so I could just click on this, go find the lookup table, and so now when you click on this button, it brings up the table, so your end user would have the ability to put information in there. That's pretty nice. So anyway, as you can see, there's quite a few different things in here. Also, the default values. This one's nice if you want a quick way to get back to some sort of baseline, and the end user might have changed a whole bunch of sliders and things, and now it's like, oh, how do I get back to where I started? Having a default is really helpful. So you could have a button here that when they click it, it puts all of your inputs to their default values, even in an input grid like this one. So. Okay, so a lot of things you can do with that. I didn't cover every single little thing, But I hope the takeaways are, first of all, that the dashboard can do a lot of things, and it almost gives you the power to make something that's like a unique special purpose software for your end user, to give them the calculator or simulator or whatever thing or decision making help system that can help them just for their specific needs. But at the same time, these dashboards are time consuming, and and just be careful of re-engineering or developing a mirrored image of the model itself. Just I've done it multiple times where I've built these complex dashboards with a background image of the system, and it shows where all the flows go. It's time consuming, and you end up spending more time beautifying this graphic, this dynamic graphic, when in the model behind it, it's doing the calculations, has the ability to show you values. It's just a matter of developing a model that is easy to read. And sometimes that takes a little bit of extra time, but I think it's better to put more time into making the model itself easier to visualize, instead of putting a dashboard that links to all the outputs. Because in the end, it would probably serve you better to have the model easier to read anyway, and just keep the dashboard just very minimal if possible. That would be my takeaway. So that's it. That's all I have to share. I hope that was useful, and please let me know if you have any questions. I'll wait around here a bit longer. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining, and also happy Halloween. And hopefully we'll be releasing GoldSim 15, and keep your eyes open for that one. We will be announcing it when we're getting a little bit closer, but we're almost, I would say we're really close to getting to feature complete, and so it'll have a lot of nice features in it. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions, and otherwise, see you next month.